Hey everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK. We're on Discord and Patreon, links in the description. We're back with more Mom and Mom Aftermath commanders. I'm playing Nahiri, Forged in Fury, basically living weapon tribal, and honestly, you don't see much of that. Scott's playing Heliod the Radiant Dawn on a mission to make everybody draw so many cards. Then he'll cast big, scary, colorless things for free. Speaking of free, Matt's gonna attempt to cast free things as well, after he casts high mana value sea creatures with Kiora. Kovacs is on a plan with Yargle and Multani to one-shot his opponents. He's gonna Voltron his commander, or Golgari fling it at his opponents. Please subscribe if you haven't already, it truly helps support the channel, and stick around for an appearance from my fat cat Meatball. He's so chunky. I started us off with a decent turn 1 with a mountain into a soul ring into a Fell War Stone. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised by that. I pass over to Scott and he plays a tapped Port Town. Passing to Matt, he plays an island and plays Quest for Ula's Temple. So eventually he might be able to cast free sea creature type-ish spells. He passes the turn over to Kovacs, who plays a tapped, pretty, overgrown tomb, and then he passes back to me. I drop a Plains as my land for turn before casting Sword of the Animist, using my Soul Ring, and hopefully getting some lands in the future. On to Scott's turn, he plays an island, and then he casts Triskaidekaphile, granting him no maximum hand size and a possible alt win condition. He passes, and on Matt's upkeep, he reveals a Selvala off the top of his library thanks to Quest for Ula's Temple. After that, he plays a Mosswort Bridge. This will have him Hideaway. He'll look at the top 4 cards of his library, choose one, and exile it underneath Mosswort Bridge. On Kovacs' turn 2, he plays Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, so everything's a swamp. Before we go to turn 3, I'd like to give a huge shout out to our latest patron, Mortarion. Thank you so much for your support. It truly means a lot. On my turn, I draw, and then I play Arid Mesa as my land for turn. I crack it, losing 1 point of life. I find a Plains, because I realize I don't have a Sacred Foundry in my deck, which is probably a mistake. I cast my commander, Nahiri, Forged in Fury. Then I pass the turn over to Scott. He plays another island as his land, and then he casts Solitary Confinement, making him troublesome to deal with. This thing's like, yo, you can't target me, and your damage isn't damage. He moves to combat at Kovacs, pinging him for 1 with his guy that's afraid of the number 13. On Matt's turn, he plays an island, and into a Kadama's Reach, so he'll go find 2 basic lands, 1 forest hits his battlefield, and an island went to his hand. Over to Kovacs' turn, he plays basically Kadama's Reach with Cultivate.
Hey, you copied me with the other version of my card.
From his library, putting 1 onto the battlefield tapped. In this case, it's a forest as well. Copycat. He passes, and on my turn I play a Spectator Seating as my land. I equip Sword of the Animist to Nahiri. I move into combat. I'll stack it so Nahiri triggers before Sword, so I will exile the top card of my library. It's a fancy path to exile. Then Sword of the Animist resolves. I'll go find a Plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Matt takes his beats, and then on my second main phase, I cast that fancy path to exile, exiling the Triskaidekaphile on Scott's board. He gets a Plains, and on his upkeep, he lets Solitary Confinement sacrifice and hit his bin. Then he drops Iganjo, Seed of the Empire. He casts his commander, Heliod the Radiant Dawn. When that ETBs, he gets that Solitary Confinement of his back to his hand. Then he'll pass the turn over to Matt. No luck from Quest on his upkeep, but he plays Hinterland Harbor as his land for turn, so that's cool. Then he casts that Selvala, Heart of the Wilds, that we saw a little bit ago. So he's hoping to be able to draw cards because he's going to have some big, thick, swole creatures. On Kovacs' turn, he drops another forest, and then he casts Dig Up with its cleave cost. So that's an expensive demonic tutor. He goes and finds a good card and passes to me. I play SRAM, Senior Edificer, on my turn. Then I go into the red zone with Nahiri at Scott, and I'll resolve Nahiri first.
Hey, that's a Cauldron Complete. That's pretty good.
Yeah, finding a free Cauldron Complete is pretty good. I grabbed a Plains again with Sword of the Animist, and then on my second main phase, I get to cast a free Cauldron Complete. This will also trigger SRAM, and Cauldron Complete will be attached to a 0/0 germ when it enters the battlefield, triggering Selvala, drawing me a card. I pass the turn, and on Scott's turn, he activates his commander, flipping him to Heliod the Warped Eclipse. Now all of his stuff has flash, and he could potentially get some really cheap spells. He drops Seagate Reborn as a land, paying 3 life. Following that, he passes the turn over to Matt, and again on his upkeep, no luck from Quest. He'll play an island as his land for turn before casting his commander, Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep. After that, with the help of Selvala, he will cast The Great Henge. This could potentially draw him a lot of cards. In response, Scott casts Standstill, anticipating that Matt will probably play another spell so that people can start drawing a bunch of cards. And rightly so, Matt activates the Great Henge and casts In Search of Greatness, gaining 2 life in the process. This will trigger Scott's Standstill, so all of Matt's opponents will be able to draw 3 cards from this. In addition, and on Matt's end step, Scott flashes in solitary confinement again. So Scott is once again kinda hard to kill. On Kovacs's turn, he drops a Cabal Coffers as his land for turn. He sadly has to pass the turn with nothing else to do, discarding some lands. On his end step, I cast a Swords to Plowshares targeting Kiora. That'll exile her, but Matt gets to gain a little bit of life, so that's cool. Then onto my turn proper, I untap, I draw, and I play a Scythe Claw in my first main phase. This triggers SRAM, getting me a card draw, as well as attaching a 0/0 germ to that bad boy. Then I cast a Masterwork of Ingenuity, again, getting a card draw from SRAM, and I had the Masterwork enter the battlefield as a copy of Scythe Claw as well. So I got 2 Scythe Claws. I move into combat at Scott and Matt, hoping that Scott would block with his commander and forgetting kinda that he had that solitary confinement. When I attacked, Nahiri triggers twice, seeing 2 equipped creatures attack. I exile Hammer of Nazan and Hexgold Hoverwings. I get a mountain off Sword of the Animist. Matt takes his beats and Scott shrugs.
I guess I was hoping that you would just like block with your commander, but I was being dumb and I forgot you had that card back up.
Yeah, that was a bad attack, but whatever. On my second main phase, I cast Hammer of Nazan, again triggering SRAM, drawing me a card, and attaching it to SRAM for free. I also cast Hexgold Hoverwings. When it enters the battlefield, it'll make a 2/2 Rebel, so I forego equipping that to another creature. I draw my cards from SRAM, and then I pass the turn, having to discard. On Scott's upkeep, Solitary Confinement will trigger, so he discards a card.
And then I'm not going to draw because I skipped my draw step.
Haha, take that! He plays a Command Beacon as his land for turn, and then casts Emergency Powers. This will have everybody shuffle back up and draw a fresh grip of 7. So in response, we dump our hands as best we can. Kovacs plays Death Sprout, targeting my Nahiri. In response, I cast Resistance Reunited, giving all my equipped stuff indestructible. Kovacs finds a land off of Death Sprout, and finally, Emergency Powers will resolve, so each of us puts our graveyards and our hands back into our library, shuffle up, and draw a fresh grip of 7. Because Scott cast Emergency Powers at sorcery speed, he gets a free 7 drop. In this case, it's only a Quain Itinerant Meddler. That's better than nothing. That's what I always say. And then Scott casts an Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, for free. His opponents drew 21 cards.
I am going to exile your Nahiri and your SRAM.
Honestly, Scott, I took that kind of personal. I'm kidding. I haven't been competitive since the incident. It's still Scott's turn, so he casts a free Arcane Signet, again thanks to his commander and having his opponents draw so many cards. On Matt's upkeep, unfortunately he whiffs on In Search of Greatness, but he does see a Storm Surge Kraken on top of his library thanks to Quest, and getting another counter on that. He played an island and then cast Findhorn Elves. This triggers the Great Henge, drawing him a card. Then he casts Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep, again triggering the Great Henge, and each time he's casting creatures he gets a +1/+1 counter. He puts those on in a little bit. Kovacs drops a Command Tower as his land for turn, and then he casts Korazda Guildmage. This thing can pump a thing, giving it Intimidate, or make some tokens. He passes the turn over to me, I play a mountain and get Territorial.
I'm just gonna go ahead and encroach on your board a little bit.
No.
Just leave it there.
I had a lucky draw in finding Balin, Wandering Knight. This thing can be an immediate threat. With that out on the battlefield, I cast Nahiri, Forged in Fury, at a steep discount thanks to all of the equipment that I have. I cast Generous Gift, targeting Scott's Solitary Confinement, blowing that up and giving him an elephant. Scott's scary with his Ulamog, so I decide to activate Balin. This will have all of my equipment attached to Balin. This will have all of my 0/0 germs die because they're 0/0 germs. Now, Balin is just like super big, thick, and swole, and has haste, so I move into combat at Scott, triggering Nahiri, and I deal enough damage to him to knock him out of the game. So I thought Balin had Vigilance right now, but he doesn't. I correct that mistake in just a moment. On Matt's upkeep, he sadly whiffs again on In Search of Greatness and Scryed, and then he resolved Quest and saw a Cherix the Raging Isle on the top of his library, so that gives another counter to it as well. Now Quest is online thanks to its 3 counters. He casts Breaching Leviathan. This will trigger Kiora, so he'll look at the top 9 cards of his library and cast one of them for free. He finds a Lorthos the Tidemaker. This thing could potentially tap down all sorts of blockers from his opponents. And again, the Great Henge triggers. Lorthos resolves, and then Breaching Leviathan resolves. In response to Leviathan's ETB trigger, Matt taps his Mana Dorks, floating 10 mana. Then all non-blue creatures get tapped, and they won't untap next turn. He casts Storm Surge Kraken, and this again triggers his commander, Kiora, so he'll look at the top 5 cards and get to cast a free Erexmithus, Slumbering Isle, triggering the Great Henge, drawing a card. And following that, he'll cast Cherix, the Raging Isle. This yet again triggers his commander, and he gets to look at the top 4 cards of his library, hoping to find something juicy that he can cast for free. He finds a Rapid Hybridization. He decides to cast this against my commander, Nahiri, therefore giving me a 3/3 Frog Lizard token. Then he'll move into end step, and Quest for Ula's Temple will trigger, so he'll get a free Elder Deep Fiend. Can you believe it? His turn will pass over to Kovacs, and again, thanks to Breaching Leviathan, his creature does not untap. We find my Frog Lizard token, as well as all the dice we needed to represent Matt's +1/+1 counters on all of his creatures thanks to the Great Henge. Kovacs is able to cast his commander, Yargle Multani, thanks to activating Cabal Coffers. He then uses some of that mana to cast Kaya's Ghost Form as well on his commander. He'll cast Sylvan Scrying. This will have him go find a land card. In this case, it's a Reliquary Tower, but it's from 40k, so it's better. He passes the turn over to me. I play Fury Calm Snarl, revealing a plains, therefore having it enter untapped. Then I start equipping my Frog Lizard with as many things as I can in order to pose an actual threat to Matt. I equip my Scythe Claw and my second Scythe Claw, plus my Hex Gold Hover Wings, and then I move into combat at Matt. So I attack him with a 6/5 flyer that has 2 instances of draining half of his life. I deal him 6, and then Scythe Blade triggers twice, dropping him to 15 and then 7. Then I cast Relentless Assault in my second main phase. This will have me untap only my Frog Lizard, but then I get a second combat step, attacking Matt again, dealing him 6 damage, triggering both of my Scythe Claws, and because they round up, I knock Matt out of the game. Sorry, Matt. I pass the turn over to Kovacs, who plays a Swamp, and then casually drops an Overwhelming Stampede, making Yargle and Multani's power 36. He moves into combat against my defenseless board state, and unceremoniously knocks me out of the game. I did not see that coming. Congratulations, Kovacs. That was a ton of damage out of nowhere, but I should have known. And here's Meatball. He's so chunky. And there you have it, that's the game. Well, we've been having a lot of fun with these Mom and Mom Aftermath commanders. We hope you've been enjoying the games. Please let us know what you think in the comments, and as always, thank you for watching.